My parents left me in an orphanage when I was 12 so they could travel with my sister. Now they're unemployed, desperate, and trying to get close to me again. So I gave them what they deserved. My name is Adam. I'm 24 now, but this story started many years ago when I was just 12. Back then, I thought my family was relatively normal, at least what I considered normal. We weren't rich, but we lived in a decent house, had okay clothes, and life seemed peaceful. My parents, Laura and Greg, never showed that anything was wrong until the day everything collapsed. And then there was my sister, Emma, the golden child, you know how it goes. Teachers adored her, and my parents never stopped bragging. If Emma sneezed, it was like she'd won a Nobel Prize. And me, I was just Adam. It's not like I was a problem kid or anything, but it didn't matter what I did. I felt invisible. Emma's drawings went straight onto the fridge. Mine got a pat on the back and a "nice one, Adam." The truth is, I never came to hate Emma for it. It wasn't her fault our parents treated her like a trophy and treated me like I was disposable, but it still made me feel irrelevant. Anyway, the day everything fell apart started like any other. I was in my room playing with some old action figures I still hadn't managed to let go of. Then Laura called me downstairs with that strange voice parents use when they're trying to sound calm, but you can feel something's wrong. I thought it was because I'd left the milk out or forgotten some chore. But when I walked into the living room, both of them were sitting on the couch with expressions way too serious for milk. "Sit down, Adam," Greg said, pointing to a chair in front of them. His tone was dry, like this was a meeting, not a family conversation. Laura tried to look understanding, but there was something off in her eyes. I sat down, confused. Then she took a deep breath and said, "Adam, we need to talk about something important." For a second, I thought someone in the family had died, maybe a distant grandparent. But then Greg blurted it out. "We're having financial difficulties and we can't take care of you anymore." For a moment, I thought I'd heard him wrong. "What do you mean you can't take care of me? Am I some kind of subscription you're canceling?" I just stared at them, trying to understand what they'd said, but Laura kept going. "It's not your fault, sweetheart. We've been dealing with this for a while, and we had to make a very difficult decision." A difficult decision? Seriously? They sounded like they were choosing which TV package to keep, not like they were abandoning their kid. I asked what that really meant, still clinging to the hope that I'd misunderstood. Laura explained they'd arranged a temporary place for me, that it would only be for a while. She kept repeating that word, temporary, like it was supposed to calm me down. "Then why isn't Emma going to the orphanage too?" I blurted out, desperate to understand. Laura's face hardened for a second before she answered. "Emma is in school, Adam. She needs stability." Stability? Like I didn't? Greg stepped in before I could say anything else. "This isn't about choosing one of you. It's about what makes the most sense right now." I started crying, but not quietly. It was ugly crying, sobbing, hiccups, the whole thing. Because how is a 12-year-old supposed to react when his parents tell him they're giving up on him? Laura tried to hug me, but I shoved her away. "Why are you doing this?" I kept repeating. And all they did was repeat their rehearsed lines about hard decisions and financial problems. The next day, they packed a small backpack with my things and drove me to the orphanage. The ride was silent. Not thoughtful silence, heavy silence, the kind where you feel the weight of every breath. I watched them the whole time, waiting for one of them to falter, to look at me and say, "This is a mistake. We're taking you home." But it never happened. When we arrived, I stayed in the car for a while, still hoping they'd change their minds. Greg turned to me and said, "Come on, Adam. Let's just get this over with." Like it was a boring task on his to-do list. I stepped out of the car, clutching the backpack they'd packed. The couple who was going to take me in, Mr. and Mrs. Miller, were standing at the door. They looked kind, but I barely noticed them. All I could think about was that my parents were about to leave me there. Laura knelt in front of me and said, "We love you, Adam. This isn't goodbye forever. Just give us some time, okay?" She kissed my forehead, but it didn't comfort me at all. It felt like she'd stuck a return label on me. Greg held out his hand. Yes, his hand. A handshake. No hug. Like I was some distant cousin. And then they left. I stood there on the porch, watching the car disappear down the street, my chest getting heavier by the second. I kept thinking, they'll come back. They have to come back. But they didn't. That night, I replayed everything in my head. What did I do wrong? Was I not good enough? Why did Emma stay and I didn't? Those questions hammered my mind for weeks. And the worst part was, I had no answers. Only the promise that it was temporary. And even though I wanted to believe it, deep down, I knew I'd never see my parents again. Looking back now, I can see that was the moment everything changed. It wasn't just that they left, it was how they left. Like I was a burden they were relieved to get rid of. But at 12, I didn't know how to put that into words. I just knew my parents were gone, and I was alone. In the days that followed, the Millers tried to make me feel at home. Mrs. Miller made pancakes every morning. Mr. Miller would pop into my room now and then with some random little curiosity. But no matter how hard they tried, I couldn't trust anyone. My parents had promised it was only for a while, and I clung to that like it was the only thing I had left. They're going to call. They'll explain everything. I'll go home. But days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into years. And nothing. No letter. No call. I didn't understand how deep the hole was until I went back to school. The other kids noticed I was new and started asking a million questions. Where are you from? Why did you move here? I didn't have the energy to tell the truth, so I made up vague answers like, oh, my parents are working in another state for a while. But even saying that hurt. It tasted bitter. One day after school, I was sprawled out on the Miller's couch, stalling on homework and scrolling on my phone. That's when I made the mistake of looking my parents up online. I didn't even know what I was searching for, maybe proof they still thought about me. What I found stole my breath. There they were, smiling on a beach. They looked happier than I'd ever seen them. The caption said, "Finally living our dream." My stomach twisted as I kept scrolling. Photo after photo, tropical islands, fancy dinners, and of course, Emma. She was in almost every picture, usually front and center, with captions like, "Our wonderful daughter." It was like I didn't exist. The more I looked, the more the rage grew. They said they couldn't afford to keep me. Yet there they were, living like travel influencers. And Emma wasn't in an orphanage like I was. She was still with them, smiling for the camera like life was perfect. It felt like my head might explode. They didn't just abandon me. They erased me. But what shattered me most wasn't even the photos. It was the travel blog. Yes, they created an entire blog about their journey to freedom. They wrote about giving up material things, meaning me. Like I was some object they'd removed from their life so they could feel enlightened. I scrolled down to the comments and something caught my eye. A comment from an account with no profile picture. It said, "Must be nice to run away and leave everything behind. Hope that doesn't come back to haunt you." The words were sharp, like they were meant to cut through the pretty image Greg and Laura were selling. My mind raced. What did they mean by leave everything behind? Were they talking about me or something else? I clicked the profile, but it was private, just a gray circle. I kept searching for clues. On another photo, Laura holding a tropical drink, someone commented, "Looks like running away from the city was worth it, huh?" My chest tightened at the words running away from the city. Why would someone say that? I kept reading, but I didn't find anything as direct as those two. Most people were just praising them, saying how inspiring their lifestyle was. I wanted to scream at those people for not seeing the truth behind the facade. Were those just random haters? Or did they know something I didn't? Greg and Laura had already lied to me about not being able to support me. Clearly, that wasn't true. So what else had they lied about? That question kept pounding in my head, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. But what could I do? I didn't have access to their past or the secrets they were hiding. All I could do was stew in those cryptic words and wonder what else they'd buried. I closed the laptop with shaking hands, not only because of the lies, but because of the complete absence of regret. They were out there living their best lives while I was learning how to survive without them. That night at dinner, the Millers could tell something was wrong. It's not like I was hiding it well. "Everything okay, Adam?" Mr. Miller asked, setting his fork down. "Yeah," I mumbled, not wanting to talk about it. But Mrs. Miller wasn't the type to let things slide. "You don't have to tell us anything if you don't want to, but if something's bothering you, we're here, okay?" she said gently. I looked at them. Two people who barely knew me and yet cared more than my own parents ever had. And I don't know why, but I cracked. I told them everything, the blog, the photos, the captions. I thought they'd tell me to stop digging or say it didn't matter. They didn't. Mrs. Miller just listened with that quiet compassion I was still learning to accept. Mr. Miller, on the other hand, looked visibly angry. "You have every right to be angry," he said, leaning forward. "What they did to you isn't your fault. It's theirs. And don't let anyone convince you otherwise." It wasn't some epic speech, but it hit me hard. For the first time, someone was acknowledging that none of this was my responsibility. In the weeks that followed, I started adjusting better to life with the Millers. They weren't perfect, but they were consistent. They asked how my day went, helped with homework, encouraged me to try new things. I even started opening up more at school. I joined a few clubs and made some friends, but the anger I felt toward my parents didn't go away. If anything, it grew. Still, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let their choice define who I was. So I threw myself into school activities. Not because I wanted to become the most social kid in the building, but because I needed my mind busy. I signed up for the debate club. After all, arguing was something Greg and Laura had unknowingly trained me for, so why not use it to my advantage? And weirdly enough, I was good at it. Later, I got a part-time job. Mr. Miller had been hinting for a while that I might like having my own money. So I finally applied for a position at a local bookstore. Nothing glamorous, but I loved being surrounded by books and people who actually wanted to talk about them. And it gave me a taste of independence. Every paycheck felt like another step toward building a future that belonged to me. Somewhere along the way, I met Ryan. Ryan treated me like a normal guy, not a charity case. When I told him about my parents, he just nodded and said, "Man, that sucks. Let's play video games." One afternoon, I came home from school and realized the house was way too quiet. Normally, Mrs. Miller would be in the kitchen humming along to some playlist of old songs, and Mr. Miller would be in the garage tinkering with something. But this time, I heard low voices coming from the dining room. I froze in the hallway just out of sight and strained to listen. "Do we tell him?" Mrs. Miller's voice sounded hesitant. "He has a right to know," Mr. Miller replied. "If it's about him, we can't hide it. That'll only hurt more." "But he's doing so well right now," she argued. "We should wait until we know more. This letter doesn't explain much. It might be nothing." My heart started pounding. A letter. About me. Before I could figure out how to ask without admitting I'd been eavesdropping, Mr. Miller sighed. "Fine, we'll wait. But if they contact us again, we're going to have to tell him everything." Footsteps moved toward the living room. I ran to the kitchen and pretended I'd just walked in. Mrs. Miller smiled when she saw me, but I couldn't shake the strange feeling in my chest. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, I crept back into the dining room. I knew I shouldn't snoop. But curiosity won. There was a stack of mail on the table. Right in the middle, I found an envelope with my name on it. I hesitated before picking it up. The return address was a law office. My stomach knotted. I opened it. I read the first lines. "To whom it may concern, this is a notice regarding outstanding debts associated with Gregory and Laura. As legal guardians listed for Adam, we are requesting any relevant documentation regarding the family's financial status during the period in which..." I stopped reading. My hand was shaking. Debts. Was that what Greg and Laura had been running from? Had they left me behind not because they couldn't support me, but because they didn't have the guts to face their own mess? I shoved the letter back into the envelope and returned it to the pile, trying to place it exactly as it had been, as if I'd never touched it. My mind was racing. I had no idea what to do with that information, but one thing was clear. Greg and Laura had lied about way more than just money. When I turned 16, things started clicking into place. I was working my tail off at school, balancing my job with extracurriculars, and it was paying off. My grades were great, and my debate coach told me I had a real shot at a scholarship. For the first time, I let myself picture a future without my parents, without the damage they'd left behind. And honestly, it felt liberating. Then the scholarship became real. I still remember the day the letter arrived. I'd applied almost on a whim, not really believing I had a chance. When I opened the envelope and saw the words, "full scholarship," I couldn't believe it. I ran downstairs to show the Millers. They were practically glowing with pride. Mrs. Miller hugged me tight, and Mr. Miller kept repeating, "I knew it. I knew you'd do it." That night, I decided to share the news on social media. I wasn't big on posting personal stuff, but this was something worth celebrating. I wrote something simple and sincere about how hard work pays off and thanked the people who supported me. The comments started rolling in almost immediately. Friends, teachers, classmates I barely even spoke to. But one comment made my stomach drop. It was from Laura. "We're so proud of you, Adam. Can we reconnect soon?" Proud. After everything, I stared at that comment for what felt like forever, and the rage came rushing back. It wasn't just that she'd commented, it was the casual tone, like we were distant relatives who'd lost touch, not parents who'd abandoned their child. I didn't respond. What could I even say? Instead, I deleted the comment and blocked both of them. That was the moment it hit me. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their guilt. I didn't need their scraps of attention. That scholarship gave me a new purpose. I dove even deeper into my studies, determined to prove to myself, and maybe a little bit to them too, that I could win without their help. Mr. Miller started giving me lessons in financial literacy. He taught me how to save, build a budget, plan for the future. Nothing glamorous, but practical. And it gave me a sense of control I'd never had before. With their encouragement, I also started tutoring younger students after school. I never imagined I'd do that, but I found out I was good at explaining things. And more than that, it felt good to help kids who were struggling. I knew exactly what it felt like to be left behind. One day during a tutoring session, Ryan asked me what my biggest goal was. Like, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" he asked, leaning back in his chair like it was the easiest question in the world. I thought for a moment before answering. I just want stability, my own place, my own life, not depending on anyone. "That's solid," he said with a grin. "Just don't forget to have fun along the way." His words stuck with me. I realized I'd been so focused on proving my worth that I'd left no space for anything else. So I promised myself I'd find balance. I kept working hard, but I started saying yes to things I used to avoid. Game nights with friends, last-minute trips, lazy afternoons at the park. Nothing huge, but it reminded me life didn't have to be only struggle and pressure. By the end of that year, I felt like a completely different person. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. The Millers had become my foundation. Ryan was like a brother. And for the first time, I truly felt like I was building a path that was mine. My parents' absence still hurt sometimes, but it didn't define me anymore. If anything, it became fuel to keep moving forward. But as usual, things took a turn on the day of my graduation. It was supposed to be the peak of everything I'd built. The moment I'd finally stand up, surrounded by the people who supported me, and say, I did it. The weeks before graduation were non-stop chaos. I barely had time to think. The Millers were beyond excited, planning a little celebration at home after the ceremony. Even Ryan, who usually made fun of anything sentimental, seemed genuinely happy for me. I remember graduation morning like it was yesterday. My mind was buzzing with everything I'd survived to get there. From the day my parents left me on the Millers' porch to the late nights studying just to prove I could do it. Mrs. Miller had ironed my graduation outfit the night before and hung it on my bedroom door with a little note that read, "We're so proud of you, Adam." I smiled when I saw it. It wasn't just the note. It was everything they'd done for me over the last 5 years. They weren't just foster parents. They were my real family. The ceremony went like those things always do. When they called my name, I walked across the stage to receive my diploma, and for a moment it felt like time stopped. The crowd applauded, and I could hear the Millers and Ryan yelling my name like I was a celebrity. It was exactly how I'd imagined it. But of course, nothing in my life stays perfect for long. After the ceremony, we gathered outside for pictures. The Millers were glowing. Ryan cracked jokes, saying my diploma should have been written in crayon. Even Emma showed up, which surprised me, since she usually kept to herself. Everything was in place. Everything was perfect. Until I saw them. On the edge of the crowd stood Greg and Laura. For a second, I thought my brain was playing a trick on me. I hadn't seen them in years, and I definitely hadn't invited them. But there they were, dressed like they'd just stepped off a cruise ship, scanning the crowd as if they were searching for someone. I tried to ignore them, hoping they'd leave once they realized I wasn't going to engage. But Greg's eyes met mine, and before I could look away, he was already walking toward me, tugging Laura along with him. My chest tightened as they approached with fake smiles plastered on their faces. "Adam," Laura said in a voice that was far too upbeat for someone who'd abandoned her own child. "You've gotten so big." Greg patted my shoulder like we were old friends reuniting. "We're so proud of you, son. This is a very important day for all of us." "All of us?" The audacity made me laugh, bitterly. I just stared at them, not sure if I wanted to scream, cry, or turn my back and walk away. The Millers and Ryan were a few feet away, clearly confused but holding back. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. "We came to celebrate with you," Greg said like it was the most natural thing in the world. "We made mistakes, Adam, but we always wanted what was best for you." Laura jumped in with that falsely sweet voice. "We've missed you so much. We thought this would be the perfect moment for us to reconnect as a family." "You don't have the right to call yourselves my family," I said. "You abandoned me. You left me with strangers and never cared to find out if I was okay. And now you show up like nothing happened." Laura's smile faltered. Greg's face turned red. "That's not fair, Adam," he said, trying to stay calm. "We did what we thought was best for everyone." "Best for everyone?" I shot back. "You mean best for yourselves. Don't come here pretending you did this for me. While you were living your dream of freedom, I was trying to figure out how to survive without you." By then, people were starting to stare. The Millers stepped closer, their faces full of concern and anger. But the person who shocked me most was Emma. She walked right up to Greg and Laura and said firmly, "You're not going to ruin this for him. You've done enough damage." It was the first time I'd ever seen her stand up to them, and I'd never felt so proud. Greg tried to argue, but Laura grabbed his arm and whispered something about avoiding a scene. They shot me one last look, half frustration, half pity, and then turned and walked away. The Millers came to me immediately, hugging me tightly and reminding me that day was about my achievements, not their drama. Ryan handed me a tissue and muttered, "Dude, you should charge them for emotional damages." That actually made me laugh, really laugh. The rest of the day passed in a blur. We went back to the Miller's house where they decorated the backyard with balloons and banners. And for a few hours, I let myself forget Greg and Laura and just enjoy the people who truly mattered. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat on the porch with Emma. She looked at me and said, "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't see it before, but you were right. They manipulated us. They only think about themselves." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. We sat in silence for a while, and it was enough. For the first time, I felt like Emma and I were finally on the same page. That day wasn't just graduation. It was me standing up for myself. It was me cutting ties for good with the people who tried to destroy me. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And still, I knew my parents weren't done yet. The way they'd appeared out of nowhere and tried to push their way back into my life left me with a strange feeling in my gut. And as usual, my instincts were right. A week after graduation, I got an email from Laura. For a split second, I thought it might be an apology, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. It was a long wall of text, packed with half-truths and flimsy excuses. She talked about how hard life had been for them, how they'd made mistakes, but how they'd always had my best interests at heart. And then the real reason finally showed up. "We hope we can move past all of this and reconnect as a family. You're doing so well. We're so proud of you. Maybe you could help us during this difficult time." Help them? After everything. Or rather, after everything they didn't do. The nerve of it made me want to laugh, but it was the kind of laugh that tastes bitter. I didn't reply. I deleted the email and blocked the address. But the anger didn't disappear. It hovered in the background like an itch you can't scratch. Emma kept an eye on them, more out of curiosity than anything else. She'd call and update me on the ongoing parental meltdown. According to her, they'd blown through every bit of savings trying to keep up that dream life image. The travel blog had collapsed, and all that was left were debts and a ruined name. They'd sold almost everything and were couch hopping with distant relatives who were already losing patience. "They're a disaster," Emma told me, "but they still blame you. Like if I forgave them, everything would magically fix itself." "Forgive what? Leaving me without a home at 12? Emma sighed on the other end. "I'm not saying they're right, Adam. I'm just telling you what they're saying. Their downfall wasn't something I celebrated, but I didn't feel sorry for them either. They made their choices. Now they were living with the consequences. Meanwhile, my life kept moving, until one day my phone buzzed with a notification that made my stomach drop. Greg and Laura had found me on LinkedIn. They'd commented on a post I made about my scholarship. "We're so proud of you, Adam. Let's talk soon." It was almost the same message they'd thrown at me on graduation day. I didn't even know they knew how to use LinkedIn. I blocked them immediately. But it wasn't enough. They started messaging people in my network, co-workers, professors, even the Millers. Every message had the same shameless tone, like I was the cruel son who had abandoned them. One of those messages reached my manager at the bookstore. She called me into her office. "Look, I don't want to get involved," she said carefully, "but someone claiming to be your parents sent us a really strange email." I felt heat rush to my face. I was mortified. "I'm so sorry," I said. "They're not part of my life. I'll handle it." To my relief, she didn't push. "If they bother us again, tell me. We're on your side." It was comforting, and also terrifying, because it showed me exactly how far Greg and Laura were willing to go. It wasn't enough to invade my personal life. They were now trying to sabotage my professional life too. That's when Emma stepped in and blew the whole thing wide open. She made a post on social media and told the truth. Plain, direct, no sugarcoating. She wrote about how they abandoned us, refused to take responsibility, and how she and I rebuilt our lives without them. Adam and I fought hard to get where we are without their help. We don't owe anyone anything. The post went viral. Hundreds of comments, people supporting us, sharing their own stories, saying they believed us. It was surreal, comforting even, watching strangers see what Greg and Laura really were. But of course, that only made Greg and Laura spiral harder. They started posting dramatic rants, full of half-truths and outright lies, claiming we were ungrateful, that they'd sacrificed everything, that they were the real victims. It didn't land the way they hoped. In fact, it backfired. The more they talked, the more people pointed out contradictions, questioned their version of events, and saw them for who they were. Then Emma called me one day with a kind of energy I hadn't heard in a long time. "Remember that storage unit they used to have?" she said. "I found out they stopped paying. The owner let me grab some stuff before he cleared it out." An hour later, Emma showed up at my place with a beat-up cardboard box. "You need to see this," she said, dropping it on my table. Inside was a stuffed folder, late bills, eviction notices, collection letters. My stomach sank as I flipped through it. They were living way beyond what they could afford, Emma said bitterly. Failed businesses, maxed out credit cards. Looks like they'd rather run than face reality. Near the bottom, a letter from their attorney caught my eye. It talked about financial restructuring and reducing dependents to cut expenses. My name was there, literally listed as a liability. I snapped the folder shut. My hands were shaking. "They didn't leave me because they couldn't support me," I whispered. "They left me because it was easier than cleaning up their mess." Emma was quiet for a moment. "I thought you deserved to know," she said. "Thanks," I muttered, not even sure what I was feeling. After she left, I stared at that folder, torn between burning it and keeping it. In the end, I kept it. Not for them, for me. By the time I started college, their reputation was already in ruins. Any online fundraising attempts they made got reported as scams. Even the relatives who'd been letting them crash finally threw them out. According to Emma, they were living in their car now, still clinging to the idea that I owed them something. Meanwhile, I was thriving. College was everything I dreamed of, and I was determined to squeeze every drop out of that scholarship. I also started a side project, financial literacy workshops on campus. Nothing fancy, but it felt meaningful, especially after everything Mr. Miller had taught me about money. Then, in the middle of the semester, Emma called me again. "You're not going to believe this," she said. her voice mixed with frustration and disbelief. "They showed up at your apartment." "What?" My chest tightened. "They were crying, Adam, begging me to convince you to talk to them, saying they were desperate." I rubbed my temples, exhausted. "And what did you do?" "I kicked them out," she said. "I told them if they came back, I'd call the police." I didn't know if I felt rage or relief. Part of me hated that they were still trying to drag Emma into their chaos. But another part of me felt proud, because she'd changed. The girl who used to avoid conflict was finally setting boundaries. I didn't owe Greg and Laura forgiveness. I didn't owe them money. I didn't owe them time. What I owed myself was a life free from their influence. But Greg and Laura weren't the kind of people who give up, especially not when they believe there's still something to squeeze out of you. It started with phone calls, unknown numbers popping up at all hours. Most of the time I ignored them, until one day I made the mistake of answering. It was Aunt Karen, a relative I hadn't spoken to in years. She didn't waste time. "Adam, what is going on with you? Your parents are struggling, living in their car, and you're pretending they don't exist. They're your family. You should have some compassion." I almost laughed. Compassion? Where was their compassion when they dropped me off at a temporary place at 12 and never looked back? When I said that out loud, Karen huffed like I was being dramatic. "They did what they thought was right. People make mistakes. Adam, you're being cold." I hung up. I wasn't going to waste energy explaining myself to someone who either didn't know, or worse, didn't care. Over the next few weeks, more calls came in. Distant cousins, uncles I hadn't heard from in forever, all repeating the same script. I was the ungrateful son, the selfish one, the heartless one. What none of them understood was that Greg and Laura weren't just imperfect parents. They were toxic, manipulative, and completely incapable of taking responsibility. Helping them would be like throwing myself back into a hole it took me years to climb out of. When guilt didn't work, they escalated. One day I received an email from an attorney representing them. Just the subject line made me nauseous. Notice of intent to request financial support. I opened it and skimmed through the legal jargon. In short, they were threatening to sue me for financial abandonment. According to them, now that I was successful, I had an obligation to support them. It was insane. First of all, I wasn't rich. I was doing well, yes, but I was still early in my career. And on top of that, I'd gone through the foster care system. Legally, I didn't owe them anything. I forwarded the email to a lawyer the Millers recommended. She reassured me immediately. "This won't go anywhere," she said. "They have no case. They're trying to scare you into giving them money. Don't respond." It was good advice. Still, it made me sick. The idea that they could twist the story, paint me as the villain after everything. It felt like salt in an open wound. So I did the only thing that actually helped. I kept building. By then, my financial literacy workshops had grown fast. What started as a small campus project turned into a real organization, helping young people learn how to manage money and build a future. I partnered with nonprofits, schools, even big companies. Every milestone pushed me farther from the 12-year-old boy standing on that porch watching his parents drive away. Then an email arrived from a production company. They'd heard my story through one of the nonprofit partners and wanted to interview me for a series about overcoming hardship. At first, I hesitated. Did I really want my story out there? I talked it through with the Millers and Emma, and I agreed. If my experience could help even one kid in foster care feel less alone, it would be worth it. Filming was surreal. At one point, they asked if I wanted to talk about Greg and Laura. I thought about it for a long time. In the end, I mentioned them briefly, not to publicly destroy them, but to explain my journey. They made their choices, I said during the interview. And those choices shaped me in ways I never expected. But they don't define me. What defines me is the life I built, the family I chose, and the work I do. During a break, the producer pulled me aside. She looked uneasy. "Adam, we found something during our research. It's about your parents. Are you ready to hear it?" By that point, I honestly thought nothing could surprise me anymore. "Tell me," I said. She took a breath. "It looks like they were evicted after defaulting on several loans. And there are signs of fraud." Fraud. The word hung in the air like a weight. She nodded. Nothing massive, but there's a pattern. Shell businesses, suspicious credit activity, loans they could never repay. They left a lot of people in trouble. The anger I thought I'd buried came roaring back. So it wasn't just personal. They weren't just selfish. They were actively hurting people and running when the consequences hit. The producer looked at me with quiet sympathy. "I thought you should know, in case it comes up later." I nodded, my mind spinning. I'd always thought their lies were something they did to me, but seeing the trail of damage they left behind, it made everything fit. They abandoned me because it was convenient, because it was cutting losses. When the documentary aired, the response was overwhelming. I got messages from all over the country, people sharing similar stories, thanking me for speaking up. Some said it gave them hope. Others said they finally felt seen. It hit me harder than I expected, and just like we predicted, Greg and Laura tried to use the documentary to play the victim and promote themselves. They went online posting dramatic essays about how I'd made them look like villains, how they were the real victims. It didn't work. If anything, it made things worse for them. People pushed back, pointed out inconsistencies, questioned their claims. The more they talked, the clearer it became who they really were. And while all of that noise happened, I bought my home. A quiet, cozy place, my own place where I finally felt like I belonged. I invited the Millers and Emma over for a housewarming dinner. We spent the night laughing, eating too much, remembering everything we'd survived. Emma was thriving too. She graduated. She started her career, free from Greg and Laura's shadow. And honestly, I don't regret the choices I made. Cutting ties with Greg and Laura was hard, but it was necessary. My victory came from the Millers, from Emma, and from the family I built. Not from blood, but from the people who actually showed up. Because in the end, that's what matters. Family isn't DNA. Family is who stays, who supports you, who helps you become the best version of yourself. And the family I chose is everything I ever wanted. If you enjoyed the story, please support our channel by subscribing and liking the video. See you in the next video.